Bevis, thanks for coming by again, man. This, when we first met, you said I need 2 days. We said I need 2 days, and because I got a lot to talk about, and I said, okay, perfect. So here we are, day 6. Day 6, and it's not day 6 30-minute conversations. It's day 6 2-hour, 3-hour conversations, man. And I'm extremely grateful for your time and your effort and your willingness to share your story. So we last ended with you coming back to Austin. You left New York not really knowing what happened. You just got hit. You got hit by a moving train, and you didn't even know who the conductor of the train was. And so you're back in Austin working with Denny Freeman.
Yeah, it was a, I'll just say it was a very critical point
mm-hmm.
in my future development, because it's like I'm coming out of a train wreck, so to speak, psychologically. And so speaking with Denny, he just kind of gave me an opportunity to just kind of like bypass all of that calamity and detritus, and the mere fact that I really didn't have a clear picture of cause and effect, and the circumstances
mm-hmm.
underpinning the collapse of the recording opportunity. We just essentially just left it on the we just left it, on as a sidebar, so to speak. We really didn't give it a lot of oxygen. And the advantage for me was that Denny, had a firm imprint and impact, on the Austin music scene at that time, because he was primarily functioning as like the co-musical director at Antone's
mm-hmm.
alongside Derek O'Brien. So, his resume speaks for itself, and we literally need a day to get through that, to be honest with you. But, Denny was a good friend to me going back to 72 when I was still relatively green, And I'll reiterate, like, I can't overstate the benefit that I received from being embraced by these older, highly competent, veterans,
mm-hmm.
so to speak, that kind of enabled me to kind of accelerate my focal point on efficacy. It wasn't a situation where people have a tendency to kind of like look at different snapshots of my career, and they like to kind of like pinpoint, what I was doing at a moment in time. But the thing about it was, as I said before, coming into the scene, it was a real vertical leap, because you had to have a quality presentation.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just style over content. You know what I'm saying? So Denny was essentially what I call a cornerstone, especially in the realm of like the Austin blues scene per se, right? And the irony is that, like I said, it was literally this cadre of younger white musicians that were really blues acolytes. I used to use the expression like blues Nazis, right? Because they were really oblivious to what was happening in pop culture outside, of that particular genre. And, not to, cast a broad disparity on that, you know what I'm saying? It's literally like, if you're a dedicated blues musician, my hat's off to you, because there's a lot to unpack, right? It's not just, 3 chords and a sad story, right? So what made Denny special to me was just the fact that he had what I call, one-on-one rub shoulders, intimate contact, with all of the great players, from Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker, Lightning Hopkins, just go down the list, and the whole history of Antone's that's what makes it so special, is the fact that it really was a second home to these individuals whose careers had essentially, waned
Mm-hmm.
with the advent of the pop culture of the 70s, right?
Right.
So Antone's became like let's just say, a new, source of reliable income and credibility for these individuals. And once it got into the grapevine, that Clifford Antone was a trustworthy entrepreneur, nobody was going to get ripped off, and he was a man of his word, and he was going to do what he said he was going to do and take care of these legendary performers in a fashion that they hadn't seen hitherto. Maybe with the exception of somebody like Bill Graham from the Fillmore East or Fillmore West. You know what I'm saying?
I see.
So Denny was at a point to where he was essentially kind of, to hear him tell it, he was just kind of burnt out on the blues, per se.
Really? Okay.
Because it's literally like his job. Like,
right.
this is my workspace.
That's all he did for
I'm
decades.
24. So when we started talking about this project, I'm just looking at it through the broad lens of pop culture, right? For me, it's like 1 + 1 = 2.
I see.
Stevie's already like a superstar. Fabulous Thunderbirds are on MTV. What's wrong with this picture?
Yeah.
Where's Denny Freeman, right? Because he basically was kind of like the Kickstarter of that this whole Austin blues energy. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So for me, it was kind of like Denny would visit me. Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like he was just sitting on his hands. He was doing things and he was trying very hard. And by this time, Antone's had started to take its, let's say, its all-star lineup, people like Angela Straley, Luann Barton, Marsha Ball, to name a few, right? On like national junkets, right? Maybe they'd go to the West Coast and they'd play from San Francisco, through San Diego, down to Los Angeles
as a
blues review.
Yeah, as a unit.
An Antone's blues review type thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Similar to what you would see with like Stax Records out of Memphis, right? Like a review to where you kind of get a feel for like what this scene has to offer and what Antone's. It was about. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So he had been doing that, right? Now, I don't want to get too far afield, but the thing was, he and Clifford Antone had kind of gotten sideways over a little relationship that Clifford had with Angela Straley and Denny had with Angela Straley, and it just became like a man thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So for all intents and purposes, at this point in time, Denny wanted to do something fresh that was not necessarily, the typical
right.
Presentation that he'd be known for, and he really did not want to be codependent on Antone's to like promote this thing.
I see.
You see what I'm
trying
saying?
to break out on his own.
Yeah. So my feeling was that because of the energy of bands like the Stray Cats, because Stevie had kind of really hit the zeitgeist pretty hard by now, I told Denny, I said, I just think we just need to take the bridle off of you and just let you run amok as a guitar player, right? Like, you don't have to play nice anymore.
Right.
You don't have to play these nice chords and just with these nice tones or whatever. You can just kind of go ballistic.
Get out of the box.
Because I want to rock out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
As much as I can do. Because that's my persona, right? And so the conversation we were having was, well, let's just turn everything up and see what happens. It wasn't like a grand master scheme, that we're going to fit into this box or that box. Let's just do what you want to do. I kind of put the ball in his court. I said, let's do what you want to do. And then, of course, he pitched the ball back to me saying, well, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think about this, right? So what we wound up was essentially taking you all the way back to influences that influenced the first wave of the British invasion. So one of the first songs we worked up was a song called Slow Down by Larry Williams, who was one of the seminal rock and roll pioneers, right? Alongside people like Little Richard and Ike Turner, back in, we're talking about like 1950, 51 or 52, before I was born, right? But the Beatles had recorded the song Slow Down, and we kind of just used that as kind of like the North Star.
Okay.
And then the idea was, what do you like? I like Chuck Berry. What do you like? I like Little Richard. Well, what do you like? Well, we like Bo Diddley. You know what I'm saying? So we just went back just very much the same way that, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles or whatever were looking at the R&B imports.
Mm-hmm.
We were looking at it exactly the same way.
I see.
Right? Let's take these and then we'll put little, tweaks of our personality in the mix of it.
Yeah.
But let's just stick to what I call the master plan, right? And if it's Chuck Berry, it's going to rock. And if it's, Little Richard, it's definitely going to rock, and if it's Bo Diddley, it's definitely going to rock and swing. So we start gradually putting together a whole interesting little matrix of things that we just really loved from what I call, classic seminal music. And we were playing things like, Ain't No Fun to Me by Al Green, or It's a Real Mother for You by Johnny Guitar Watson. You know what I mean? And we were playing James Brown, you know what I'm saying, as a three-piece. But the reason that we were able to do this so effectively was because Denny basically just drafted his rhythm section or the rhythm section from the Antone's crew, which was Sarah Brown and George Raines.
Okay.
Right. So, later on, George would be like Jimmy Vaughn's like staple drummer when Jimmy went solo from the Fabulous Thunderbirds and so on and so forth. And of course, Sarah, was just a very popular, versatile, like session caliber bass player, right? And the fact that she was female, appealed to me just because I felt like that was going to be a fresh look. And not only that, she certainly made her bones, you know what I'm saying? So she was just considered like a mainstay on the scene, and she could sing, and she was a songwriter on top of that, right? So the energy of that group was very formidable right off the bat because everybody was seasoned, you know what I'm saying? And everybody was really intuitive with each other because they had been playing together for so long as a unit. So it was literally like just me being dropped into a ready-made band with my ability to just kind of, redecorate the walls.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And they liked my energy just simply because I'm coming from, I still have that New York sort of, big time arena.
Flash.
Yeah, it was different, right? Because I was just coming, with a specific energy that was focused on, okay, imagine me in this setting. What does that look like, right?
Right.
So, by then now I'm wearing like pompadours.
I see.
You know what I mean? Whereas my hair had been maybe a lot fuller and a lot more, 80s
glam rock,
androgynous, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to be like the super pimp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when like you look at old pictures of like Ike Turner from like 1955 or 1956 or Muddy Waters, you know what I'm saying? Like so that was my thing.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, we had a vibe.
What did y'all call yourselves?
I decided I pitched the name The Chill Factor. Because wherever we were going to be, it was going to be cool.
Easy money.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just liked the way that it looked on paper, So we were fortunate because we started out innocuously without any big fanfare, certainly weren't thinking about press or anything like that. The only kind of baseline was that we weren't going to play Antones. So we started, I think the first date that we played was like at the Black Cat. It used to be this spot on 6th Street called the Black Cat. Became a really legendary spot.
Where is it physically? You said it's on 6th Street.
Well,
but
it used to be, right?
Yeah.
The owners have passed away and moved on or whatever but it was a staple in the 80s, like, because we're talking 1988.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we played the Black Cat. We played Steamboat.
Yeah.
We played Saxon Pub. We played the Continental Club. We played the Continental Club just as Steve Wertheimer was coming into ownership of the Continental Club.
Mm.
And that was a good bonus for us also, because he took a real shine to what we were doing, and he was young and enthusiastic. And he kind of tucked us under his wing and essentially kind of just became our booking agent.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, in short order, right? It was kind of an organic progression to that. But we were playing these dates just to kind of get our legs, you know what I mean? And week by week, word started to get around, you know, like, wow, you know, Denny's doing something with Bevis. People are kind of raising eyebrows going like, how did that happen? You know, like, because it's like a peanut butter.
I thought Bevis was in New York.
Well, it's just kind of a peanut butter chocolate type thing.
I see. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know, because they're thinking like, you know, Bevis is like, you know.
Yeah, musicality was completely different.
Yeah.
But
that was the intrigue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, people forget that I'm a drummer, first of all. So, you know, I know music.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wasn't just a one-trick pony, you know. So as we started to get ahead of steam, you know, we started to really develop a following. And Steve started giving us like residency status, you know, to where we were playing at the Continental frequently, like every week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And as things started to roll along, we started to get into the arena of, let's see if we could create something original, you know, because Sarah had some original songs in her back pocket. And I was considering, you know, how we could basically, you know, create a couple of pieces out of some material that I had on the sidebar, even from the Bonsai Kick era, so to speak. But even more interesting, I was in a few conversations at that time with Stevie Ray Vaughan about, you know, writing a couple of pieces of music together. Because you got to remember, Denny and Stevie are like super tight.
Yeah.
Denny was essentially like one of Stevie's mentors.
I see.
When Stevie was in the Cobras, like Paul Ray and the Cobras, Denny Freeman was the key lead guitar player. Then Stevie came in, and of course, Stevie being Stevie, then he became kind of like a showcase of the Cobras, right? Because Denny was just cutting him loose, you know, like,
do your thing.
You know what I mean? Like, we got it. We got TNT. Let's light the fuse and let it blow up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But their relationship was very much like big brother, little brother, you know. And of course, Denny and Jimmy are like contemporaries. According to Denny, he was one of the main people that encouraged Jimmy to come from Dallas to Austin because he was already here. You see what I'm saying? Now, you got to bear in mind, like Denny is, I'm loosely saying, but I think Denny's like 7 years older than me.
Okay.
Right? So here we go. You know, I've still got this respect for him, but we're also sidekicks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm sitting on eggshells.
Right.
Oh, I wonder, you know.
What does he think about this? No, you know.
And of course, at this point in time, I literally was rootless. You know what I'm saying? Because I really didn't have an apartment or anything like that. So Denny said, you know, come and stay with me. You know, I'm living with Denny.
Yeah.
Over in this little house he had over on Jewel Street in southeast Austin, South Central Austin, off of South 5th.
Okay.
Right? No, whole nother story. Don't want to go down that road because we'll digress.
That's all right.
But I'm just trying to say, at this point in time, Denny was kind of in the middle of doing some of these Antone showcase dates abroad.
Mm-hmm.
And then while he would be away, I'd kind of be ruminating on like what we would do next, like when he got back and started to develop, pieces of music, I Can't Stand the Rain by Ann Peebles. It was a very soulful set list. You know what I'm saying? Like
Gotcha.
it was a soul-centric set list, but done with a rock and roll energy. So we didn't have a keyboard player. We didn't have horns.
Yeah.
We didn't aspire to any of that. It was just real edgy. You know what I'm saying? So over the course of a few months, it got to the point to where now we had a buzz, right? Because we're also doing a lot of shows for bigger acts like Joe Ely. We're opening for Joe Ely at Green Hall, or we're, or we're, doing opening date for Los Lobos or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Wow. And people are really, really buzzing about it because our presentation was just very, impactful, right? As we got about 8 months into the situation, then Denny got a call that his mother had received like a cancer diagnosis. So he had to disband because he was only child, so to speak, and his parents were elderly. If you can imagine, he's 7 years older than me, right? His parents were elderly and codependent on his assistance, so he had to put everything like on hiatus. Just as we were getting ready to do like a featured date at what they call the, what they call that thing? It was a festival that used to be on Town Lake.
Was it the Waterloo?
This is 88. It'll come to me. Aquafest.
Aquafest, there you go. Yeah. I was thinking Waterloo Fest, but yeah, Aquafest.
Yeah, it would have been, we literally had a slot pegged for the Aquafest, and for all intents and purposes, this emergency kind of curtailed that opportunity. And so just all the air kind of came out of the balloon,
Yeah.
Because he had to go to Dallas to deal with his situation. Me, I'm still trying to struggle with survival.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But here we go again, where you got something, and it just
Muddy Waters has this song called Gypsy Woman, and the opening line goes, my mother always told me that you'd be my mother's hard luck child, right? Now, I'm not saying anything has anything to do with any type of mysticism, but I'm gonna put it this way: these standing on the precipice of something really great, blossoming or breaking through, and then dissipating has just literally been a recurring narrative, in the course of my music career.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. Because nobody's guaranteed anything ever. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But all I can say was, to my benefit, I was just wired for resiliency, I got to the point to where I started thinking about doing 3 things at once with the understanding that something was going to collapse.
Right, yeah.
That I was always going to have a contingency, fallback, or pivot.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And literally from that point, because now I'm kind of back as a key figure in the scene, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Now more opportunities are coming back to me.
I see.
Right?
Right.
So even before this thing with Denny came to a halt, I'd gotten an outreach from Ray Benson of Sleep at the Wheel, who at that point had started a management firm with this guy named Shannon Vale. Long story short, they were managing this artist out of San Antonio named Michael Morales. Okay. Michael Morales had just gotten a record deal with MCA. Right?
Oh, okay.
And they wanted me to demo some tracks that he hadn't recorded yet, that they wanted to use like for sync licensing or something of that nature. So the overture just kind of said, would you be willing to go into the studio, sing these 3 songs by Michael Morales? We'll see if we can get these attached to some type of a film or television project. Mm-hmm. That was the idea. Okay. And then they were going to cut me like a solid check as a work for hire, right, so to speak. So it wasn't like a Bevis Griffin thing.
Right.
But they wanted to sign me as an artist to do this exploratory work for them. You know what I'm saying?
I see.
So it was a paycheck and it was cool. You know what I'm saying? And while I was in the process of trying to figure out what my next step was, it just kind of kept me grounded or focused on something, you know, creative and productive to do. Now, the irony of that was, he said, you're going to go to San Antonio. So they, you know, got me a flight to San Antonio. I was up in Wichita Falls visiting with my mother. When I got this invitation from Ray, I said, okay, great, let's do that. He said, well, you need to go to San Antonio. Michael and his brother's going to be producing these sessions for you, you know. And I thought, well, I'm going to be in San Antonio for a week or so, you know, working on this project. I reached out to an old friend of mine named Kurt Otto, just on a whim, you know, to let him know, hey, I'm in San Antonio. What have you been up to, right? Kurt, turns out, was like on a whole nother frequency, right? He was a guitarist when I first met him back in the mid-'70s. And he's a multi-instrumentalist because he played guitar and keyboards with equal authority, right? And he was a songwriter. And that was the thing that we kind of bonded over, was that he was a really interesting and clever original songwriter. And so something just told me to reach out to him, and I did. And he was like, hey, you got to come over and see what I'm doing. I was like, all right, so what are you doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it turns out that he's got like a Fairlight sequencer. Okay, this is the 80s, right? So this is right at the point to where like sampling has really become like a de rigueur standard of new music production.
Right.
And a sequencer, right, is essentially like a computer with keys, right? To where every key can be a different sound, as opposed to you know, put a flatted fifth. It's like your thumb is a drum, your forefinger is a guitar sound, your index finger is a trumpet. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like however you program it.
Right. Yeah. It's like a modern day drum
and of course
machine.
it is extremely labor intensive, right? To first of all get your head around this technology.
Right.
Right? Because right now people are still in DOS. Right? Like this is pre-Apple.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. No, I got you.
So he learned to write code, right? To program this powerful sampling keyboard called a Fairlight. But I'll put it this way: when you're listening to music by like Peter Gabriel, or you're listening to the music by Phil Collins, right, of that era,
right,
you're listening to like heavily programmed, sampled productions.
I got you.
Right? And Kurt was operating like on that level, right? So, me being me, right? First thing I'm thinking was like, dude, you know, have you heard this new thing called 9 Inch Nails? Right? He's like, oh yeah, I've been listening to that for about a year, but we're going to smoke those guys. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I said, so you've been listening to like Ministry out of Chicago? He's like, oh yeah, I'm really hip to that, but we're going to smoke those guys, right? Because they don't have, you know what I'm saying? He's saying they don't have, the way that he put it, they don't have the roots that we have, right? So the long and short of it is, I got into this thing with Kurt to where he wanted to just sample my voice. He wanted to like literally just sample my voice, like singing like different phrases and different octaves and different, you know, timbers and so on and so forth. And we got into these jam sessions to where, because I played drums, I could like set up like rhythmic patterns, and he showed me how to like set up like rhythmic loops.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we literally were getting into this heavy techno, tech metal
Interesting.
thing, right? And I'm telling you, I've got so many cassettes of this stuff. It's insane. It's insanely good. And we decided we're going to call this project Rawhead TechX.
Rawhead TechX.
TECHX, like technicians from Texas. Right?
Nice.
Because we're thinking on the same wavelength as like 9 Inch Nails Ministry.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that cutting edge of synth rock technology.
So how long were you in San Antonio then?
Well, this is what I'm trying to say. It started out, you know, with essentially that 2-week stint that I was doing working with Kurt.
Right.
I'm sorry, working for Ray.
Right.
But then it became like every weekend I'm just catching a Continental Trailways bus back and forth to San Antonio.
Wow.
Right. And we would be doing like these marathon, you know, 16, 18-hour sessions. Right. I've got a track that's on YouTube called Thunderdome.
Okay.
That I can let you hear. And all I can say about it, Stephen, is that we knew at that point in time that we were ahead of the curve.
I think I'm out of sync with what's known. So fuck it. I'll just duck it. The issue. Toilet tissue. Flush it. Bust it. Move it.
Techno funk and thinking quick. Elvis 3 and Benson kick. Rawhead Rex in full effect. Cold level and Thunderdome. Full of juice and kicking flavor. Funk you first and kill your neighbor.
I'm saying all that to say Kurt essentially was a genius, right? Like literally like a polymath, right? But he was also dealing with a certain degree of psychosis. Okay. And I'm going to spare this conversation for the gory details of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to say that we had a completely creatively secure bonded relationship. Everything was just going great until we got to the point to where it's like, now we've got about 15 of these tracks, right?
Mm-hmm.
That literally were just spawned from improv, right? Like, because it was all just so experimental. It wasn't like we were sitting there, well, this is in A or this is in D.
Right.
Or, you know what I'm saying? It's like he would like create these beds, these what I call these aural tapestries, right? And then he and I would like collaborate on a rhythmic bass line, like on a rhythmic, you know, foundation for it.
I see.
And I would literally I became like a jazz singer, right? Like I'm just improvising, like off the dome. I'm not going in with a whole bunch of like preset or prefab lyrics, right? I'm literally because you got to understand, he's also listening to like Public Enemy, right?
Right.
And he was real big on NWA, like when it was like a brand new thing. He's the one that turned me on to NWA.
Awesome.
You dig what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And what Dr. Dre was doing with NWA, right? And what the Bomb Squad was doing with Public Enemy. You know what I'm saying? Like a completely different production approach, completely new, cutting edge. That's where we were.
And you're just absorbing it all and just
I'm the catalyst.
Mixing it.
I'm the catalyst, but it's literally like pilot to co-pilot, right?
Right.
It's literally like pitch and catch.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yo, since I saw you last, I built this bed, you know? What do you think about that, you know?
Wow.
I'd be like, man, that's dope, you know? Let's put some tweaks on this rhythm situation here.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted everything to be funky, you know? I just wanted everything to have like a really danceable, funky
groove.
thing to it, you know? And you had all these things happening, like out of England, like Soul to Soul, what they were calling the neo soul movement, and of course, Massive Attack, which was a whole consortium of like quote unquote DJs / producers. That's my point. The sampler made it possible to where you didn't have to be like a seasoned horn player or a seasoned keyboard player to create like really interesting textural tapestries.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was just labor intensive as hell. It wasn't like it is today where you can literally just pull stems. You can pull stems out of a file that you can just buy a file loaded with stems like an erector set, right? And you can literally just start to piece these pre-existing things together. Kurt was actually making these things like from scratch because he was programming.
Yeah.
Right?
Jeez.
So without losing the plot, what happened was it got to a point to where I had connections in New York. I knew Nile Rodgers had a new label, a boutique label in development, and I had made an appointment to go see Nile with some of this material, right? Because I had met him early on when I got to New York,
right?
I think when I met Nile, I met Nile at the point when he was working with In Excess, right? And at the power station, he invited me and my girlfriend at that time, to a little weekend soiree at his Connecticut space. Yeah, he was a made man. He was done.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
He was out there.
So anyway, he had this prospect of a new label situation, and at that time, I had acquired a new manager, a guy named Chuck Rodersman, right? And through hook or crook, because of my visibility with the Chill Factor, Chuck took a specific interest in me, and basically just wanted to sign me for whatever I wanted to do.
Whatever was going to happen, yeah.
And so he was kind of like my financial backer, so to speak, right? And so if Kurt and I needed additional specific pieces of equipment, Chuck would make that happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this was right at the point when DAT machines first came into the public view, right? Digital audio tape.
Mm-hmm.
Kurt wanted 2 of those, and Chuck got us 2 of those. You know what I mean? So that we could, bounce programs like back and forth.
I see.
Right. Nobody else was talking about this stuff like at all. Right. So I was literally kind of on Planet X. Right. And as Nile started to communicate that he was showing interest, then Kurt developed a degree of paranoia predicated on the fact that he had a form of like antisocial disorder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he was literally like self-isolated, right? Like he literally was socially awkward, right? And something had developed in his head to where he felt that if I was away off the scene, that I was doing something nefarious to kind of undermine his impact, as if I'm presenting it
all you.
As it's it's all me and he's like a side man or something.
Right.
I'm like, bro, I don't know what you're smoking. I don't know what you're sniffing, but you really, really need to cut it out.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is taking you completely off planet reality.
Yeah.
You dig what I mean? So needless to say, we got into a point to where our relationship deteriorated, because we had one of those arguments where he said things that he just couldn't take back.
I see.
You know what I mean? And
Right.
I'm just going to leave it like right there.
Right.
Okay. While that was going on, I had already overlapped and started a new project with this group called Solid Cinders, which was an established hardcore Chicago style blues act based here in Austin, Texas. And apparently it was a situation that I expected to be just relatively short-lived, like a gun for hire.
Mm-hmm.
When I sold my drums back in like 1978, when I had this project, Dirty Tricks, that I was telling you about, right? The guy that I sold the drums to was the same drummer that was in Solid Cinders, Matt Ryan, right? So he was like a little brother of mine.
I see.
And he had reached out to me because their lead singer apparently had a falling out with their guitarist, really fine guitarist, a guy named Hector Watt, who was essentially kind of like I'll use the expression, he was kind of like a acolyte of Jimmy Vaughn's insofar as he had a very, very similar Spartan approach, you know what I'm saying, sonically.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really like rooted in what I call the core essential, blues.
Traditional blues.
Yeah, like literally like Wayne Bennett, from Bobby Blue Bland out of Houston, right? Of course, Jimmy Reed, Albert King, Buddy Guy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like he had the whole matrix of styles, in his back pocket. But what was cool about Solid Cinders was they were actually doing some original material, like in that style, right? And they had a really good lead singer that played harp. Spencer Thomas was his name. But for some reason, Hector and Spencer had fallen out. And Matt and the bass player, Nick Travis, rest in peace, had suggested to Hector that I come in to help them just fulfill some dates that they already had on the books so they didn't have to forfeit.
Yeah.
And because I was friends with Matt, and because I knew Hector at that time was actually living with Lou Ann Barton at that time.
Really?
Yeah, they were an item, right? And me and Lou Ann, as I mentioned before, had been tight all along since she first got here from Fort Worth, right? So it was just a cozy kind of family affair type vibe. And I knew their material, and because I knew the material and I knew where they were coming from, and they just liked my vibe, and they just knew, well, yeah, certainly, he'll be an asset to this. And it was another source of income.
Right.
Because they had a lot of dates. They were playing frequently.
All around, just in town or
all
statewide?
all around the state, know. And that's kind of the lunacy of what I'm trying to explain to you. I'm playing like this techno metal thing one weekend, and then another weekend I'm like
traditional blues.
Straight up down home blues, And meanwhile, I'm starting to write new material with Chris Bailey from Bonsai Kick, right? So henceforth, I don't know if I even mentioned it, but in the interim, by like 1989, I got this call from Vernon Reid, right? Living Colour is going on tour with the Rolling Stones for the Steel Wheels tour. Living Colour's management is interested in helping me revive my publishing rights that were stagnant from that Jack Douglas deal that collapsed. Would I be interested in coming out with them for a few dates to where I could iron something out with their management? I'm like, of course.
Yeah.
I certainly will.
Yeah.
Where do we start?
No kidding.
Why don't you come meet us in Dallas, and then we'll just take it from there? Because they were playing 2 nights, 2 dates at the Cotton Bowl. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
So now I'm on the Steel Wheels tour with Living Colour, right? And of course, I had met Keith Richard on a couple of occasions in New York previously. Keith introduces me to a guy named Malcolm Welburn, who at that time had a band based in Austin called the Killer Bees. And they were a reggae band, right? So I met Malcolm just through happenstance, and it turns out that the reason Malcolm was there was because the drummer of the Killer Bees is a guy named Michael Hobson. His nickname is Hoppy. Hoppy Hobson. His older brother's name is Maury. Maury Hobson is a very well-known hairdresser in New York City who happened to be Keith Richards' wife's hairdresser.
Oh my goodness.
And that's how they got tickets or, passes to come and see the Stones in Texas. Right.
Man.
So I know.
That's the way the world works.
So funny, But Malcolm and I met. And I like Malcolm because he had dreads, he's white cat with dreads, but he had good dreads. Anyway, we had a nice little conversation. He's like, "Yeah, man. Well, when you ever get back to Austin, give me a call. Let's hang out, like that sort of thing." That 2 days in Dallas was so bizarre, Stephen, because it's like all my homies somehow were like in the mix, right? Like Joe Ely was back in that so-called, artist area, the backstage area. The thing with the Stones is that it's very much like a political type encampment. You know what I mean? Like each one of the artists has their own like specific area.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Like Mick's got his area, Keith has got his area, Charlie has got his area, Bill's got his area, you know what I'm saying? Ron Wood's got his area.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like it's like 5 backstage areas.
Yeah. Different vibe, different people, different everything.
Yeah. Because everybody just knows way too freaking many people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like their guest list is bananas.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, everybody wants to be close to them.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing, right? Like it's literally like you'd have an easier time getting to the White House. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a thing. But the long and short of it was, Roger Kramer and Jim Grant, who were managing Living Colour at the time, were kind of on a wave because Living Colour is winning now, right? And I mentioned to you earlier on that Mick was very instrumental in getting them their initial deal, lined up with CBS, which wound up on Epic, right? And because Mick had a production interest in the demos, right? It was in his best interest to promote that band, you know what I'm saying? Because he also had a vested interest in that debut album, right? As an executive producer. Right? It was produced by Ed Stasium, but with an underpinning, you know what I'm saying? Because Mick was the one kind of pulling some strings, calling attention to the executives at CBS that this is the thing. You really want to see this project, So naturally it made sense. Now that they've got their deal and they're making videos on MTV, you know what I'm saying? And this is a thing that started driving Living Colour's popularity because they had this massive exposure for months, for like 3 months, playing in front of 75,000 people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
By the time Cult of Personality rolled around, then that thing hit with a bullet, and went up into the top 10, so to speak.
Yeah. Right.
So now their managers are kind of flexing, right? And they're just feeling like, wow, and I know for a fact it had to be like Vernon and Will, just saying like, man, Bev, y'all ought to see if we can do something with Bev, like that sort of thing.
Right.
Just little nudges,
Yeah.
Those things don't happen in a vacuum.
No, right. Exactly.
Especially when you're as busy as those people are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most people don't have time to just look over their shoulder and say, oh, yeah, well, what about my man?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is why I'll be forever indebted to Vernon and the band, for that matter, for just even having the forethought to just give me a leg up,
Right.
But I mean, going back to the event, right? It was really surreal because I'm there and it's like, I look over here, there's Joe Ely, I look over there's Billy Gibbons, I look over here, you know what I'm saying? It's, it's Ronnie Lane, and it just felt like home.
Yeah.
It didn't feel awkward like at all because all my homies
Yeah.
were kind of in the mix.
You're with
you
your
know what I
people.
mean? You know what I'm saying? So over the course of several days, it turned into a situation where, well, you want to come down to, let's come with us to Houston. Now we're in Houston. Come with us to New Orleans. Now we're in New Orleans. Well, then come with us to Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? So the course of like 4 or 5 of these dates, you know what I'm saying? We kind of like hammer out like an arrangement. And then I get back to Austin and I've got a little cash in hand because they gave me an advance,
Okay.
you know, and then the objective was that they were going to go out and get me a publishing contract with one of the major publishing. And I think they had a target on like peer music.
Utilizing your music from Bonsai Kick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was basically just kind of like a package deal. They were going to license like 5 of my songs. You know,
Gotcha.
and just try to ferret them around and see if they could get, you know, some known entertainers like Rod Stewart. Supposedly they were trying to pitch interest to Rod Stewart for this song called I'd Really Love to Know. And on and so forth, you know, and then of course all these other different people, you know, too much to talk about here, but that was the premise, right? They thought if they could get another artist on board with one of these tracks, then it would be another bridge for me to like look at another record deal.
I see.
That was the strategy or the theory, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't have a Bonsai Kick active at that time. I wasn't like, you know, locked and loaded.
Right.
You know? And so I wound up, after all of that, I wound up getting settled in Austin. And now that I've kind of got that optimism in my back pocket, and I've also got this material from Kurt that I've developed with Kurt Otto, I said, well, this would be a really great time for me to go back into the studio with Chris Bailey.
Okay.
So I contacted my buddy, Tim Hatfield, who cut my demos that resulted in the Jack Douglas situation, right? And he came back to Austin with me, and we went to Arlyn Studios, and we cut 2 tracks over there, one called Voodoo Doll and another one called Fits and Starts. And Voodoo Doll was really cool because we actually had Tommy Shannon on bass, and we had Reese Wynans from Double Trouble on keyboards for that track, you know? And we cut that real quick. And then it seems like I went back into this situation with Jim and Roger with these demos to see if they could, you know, get some sort of connectivity for placement. Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, I'm still doing intermittent gigs with Solid Senders, right? Me and Kurt had gone into like incommunicado, right? There was a label out of Dallas, supposedly, that was really interested in getting this Rawhead TechX thing like up on its legs and out. But our relationship had just gotten too tense, you know what I'm saying? Because I just was not, at this point in time, I just was not in a position where I was going to take any sort of disrespect, you know? And I'm just going to like leave that right there, you know? And until he came to me with like the right degree of apology and the right degree of contrition, you know what I'm saying? I'm not a hard-hearted person by nature, but you got to understand, I developed a pretty thick skin.
Yeah.
Just
didn't have time for it.
From these various scenarios, falling short or taking a left when it should have taken a right. My patience had just worn thin, with anything that wasn't moving me that way.
Right.
Anything that wasn't moving me productively. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. Chris and I got into another stream because, as I said before, he's a very prolific songwriter. And he probably had like 24 new tracks. We were just trying to figure out an inflection point, like, well, what would we do and how would we do it live? You know what I mean? So I met a young bass player who had a friend who was a young drummer. They were in the thrash, right? Like they were in the Metallica, right? And the drummer in particular was super energetic and super skillful, like really great, And their attitude was just refreshing for me, right? Because they weren't like these older adult guys,
right,
thinking in terms of like this myopic, framework of like, what we could or what we should be doing, right? And just having access to that, what I call that fresh blood, that kind of younger enthusiasm,
right,
was just the shot that Chris and I needed, So we formed this group called Fell Swoop. Now, at the time in Austin, they had this, I guess you could say, like a local closed circuit television program. It was a situation where there was this program called Capsize, where it was like a lot of local artists were doing like live sets, right? And they were being like, videotaped, right? With like 3 camera angles,
right,
in a controlled sound stage, Sometimes they would go to an actual live venue and do the segment, right? Depending on what the band or whatever. But we did one of these segments. We recorded these 2 pieces, and all of a sudden we got like this burst of interest, because apparently people are up late, like watching this little show, you know what I'm saying? And so we started doing dates around the city. But I found it by that time, it was becoming increasingly more difficult to garner any sort of meaningful like label attention, right? This is still before South by Southwest or anything like that. Like there was literally just so few opportunities to get any sort of like meaningful
national attention.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I think over the course of 6 months or so, we just essentially sort of burnt out. You know what I'm saying? Because people take it for granted, like you got a band, you're trying to push forward to get something to a level of proficiency to where it has some degree of commercial credulity or commercial appeal, right? But by the same token, there's only so many clubs you can play, and then if it's literally like a roll of the dice, and that act just never really caught fire in the way that, let's say, even the Chill Factor like kind of caught fire, right? It was just a little too eclectic, a little too left of center. People didn't get it, or else it was either that or a combination of us just not having enough opportunities to play consistently to connect, with that audience, because there was a lot of competition. There was just a lot of bands.
What years was this?
This had to be, by now, we're talking maybe 2005.
Okay.
Maybe 2002, 2000.
Early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s, Yeah. And you got to forgive me. Like I said, if I get these timelines blurred, it was literally due to the fact that I was just doing a lot of things simultaneously.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Now, in the interim, between the Solid Cinders situation, then there was this project that was really great called the Cosmopolitans that I may or may not have mentioned to you earlier, right? But this was essentially like a a spontaneous supergroup, for lack of better terms, right? Around 1991, while I was doing this thing with the Solid Cinders, while I was doing this thing with Kurt Otto, right? I told you I'd done this sidebar project at this venue called Studio D with One Fell Swoop. I had a friend of mine that co-produced those sessions alongside me and Tim Hadfield, a guy named Stephen Doster. He's a really, well-known, well-respected songwriter, singer, performer in his own right. And Stephen and I had come to a meeting of the minds, and he co-produced these tracks that we did at Studio D, right? One of the tracks was this beautiful ballad that I wrote called "Words Just Get in the Way." It's kind of like in the same realm as something like "Purple Rain," right? Like a really big, kind of powerful orchestral power ballad type thing.
Say that I love you, but not around me.
We had done these sessions, and I got word from Steven that Alejandro's girlfriend at the time had an unfortunate situation, and she had taken her life. And we knew that Alejandro had that couple had two small kids in the household, two small children in the household. And Stephen proposed that we put together some sort of a benefit type of performance,
right,
to try to, raise awareness and bring some financial support to that family. Now, I knew Alejandro at that point just in passing.
What's Alejandro's last name?
Escobedo.
That's what I figured, but okay.
Yeah. And and one thing led to another, and Stephen and I and Will Sexton, like Charlie Sexton's younger brother, Will, it kind of had a conversation and came to the idea that we could circle the wagons and pull some people together in a way that was going to be really vibrant and really fun. And we could put a situation together that was kind of in the vein of like the Traveling Wilburys.
Okay.
Which was like a popular thing at that time, right?
Right.
Because that was like Roy Orbison with Bob Dylan and
right.
Tom Petty.
Just an all-star review.
And Bob Dylan.
Yeah, situation. Yeah.
Right.
All-star is an understatement.
Well, we're just saying we're thinking if those guys can basically just kind of like let their egos down, you know what I'm saying, and just get together and have fun like that, why can't we do something similar like that, right? And we'll get, what I enjoyed was just the fact that you could get a bunch of disparate people from like different, stylistic points, right? And just still find a way to amalgamate that.
Yeah.
And when you got that much talent in a confined space, anything can happen.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So, so we had Malcolm, from the Killer Bees, and Terry Lacaze, who had been playing with Alejandro in this group called Buick McCain. And of course, Will Sexton, had his own thing going on, and Stephen Doster and myself. And we were just performing kind of like in a round robin type of situation where I would do, three or four songs, and then Stephen would come to the forefront and do, 3 or 4 songs, and then And that was the core concept. And then Alejandro got wind of it, of what we were doing, and he wanted to perform with us. And we were going like, well, that's great, but this is for you. You don't, you don't have to participate.
Yeah.
But at that time, he hadn't really established like his next presentation of like songs or anything like that. Because if I recall directly, he was still working at Waterloo Records. You know what I'm saying? Like a 9-to-5 thing. Like, not that there's anything wrong with that at all. But I'm just saying he wasn't like he was on some sort of
tour or
national
something.
touring schedule or something like that. Plus, he had just suffered the trauma of this tragedy. You know what I mean?
Right.
But for all intents and purposes, what wound up happening was when he got wind of it and threw his hat in the ring, then it became clear that he actually had a new song cycle that he wanted to kind of air out. And this seemed like a really great, platform for him to just kind of like get his feet wet, presenting some of this new material, So it made the whole thing even more poignant, right? And so what we wound up doing was essentially we did like a Austin club tour over the course of that month. And we played like every meaningful venue in Austin with the Cosmopolitans and sold everything out. That's a really fond memory for me because at the Steamboat where we did our first engagement, that's where I met my wife. A girlfriend of mine said, hey, I brought my roommate to the show. Would you like to meet her? I was like, maybe. Like, where's she at? She's like sitting over there in the corner over there. I was like, oh, yeah. I think I'd like to meet her, Anyway, moving forward from all of that, then I got this invitation from this really great artist, one of my best buddies. He was like one of the best men at my wedding, as a matter of fact. Because he was a friend of my wife's. His name is Dino Lee. Now, all I can say is this, is that Dino Lee was like the Red Hot Chili Peppers before the Red Hot Chili Peppers was a thing, right? Like, he was this really interesting performer insofar as he's a entertainer with a capital E, right? Like an impresario, right? Have you ever heard of the band called Guar?
Yeah.
Okay, so before Guar, Dino had this thing called the White Trash Review in Austin.
Okay.
This is right about the time. He was one of the first people from Austin to be interviewed by MTV, right? This goes all the way back. I met Dino in New York before I'd moved back to Austin because they had this event called the New Music Seminar. This was before South by Southwest ever started. This was like a year before South by Southwest. The New Music Seminar was the core concept that South by Southwest was based upon. So I met Dino in New York, right? And he already had been doing these shows like at Liberty Lunch. See, I met my wife in 91 and I got married in 95. Liberty Lunch was going full speed ahead.
Yeah.
And the reason I can remember that is because I remember there was a short period of time for about 6 months. I was actually doing a sidebar gig where I was reviewing like live shows. It was a magazine called the Austin Rage.
Okay.
Another sidebar. But I got pulled into this scenario to where they wanted an artist to review live shows. It was a cool gig because obviously not only could you get into the shows, but you got money for going to the shows.
It's a pretty good gig.
Yeah. So in a short period of time, I interviewed Seal. I interviewed Alanis Morissette when she was brand new.
Okay.
I interviewed Bjork.
Wow.
The day before I got married. I'll never forget that because she wrote a really sweet little note to me and my wife that I keep in a frame.
That's
right.
cool.
Just kind of wishing us good luck on that. I was just doing that as a tangent. As a matter of fact, I think I did a review of a Van Halen show. It used to be a venue called South Park Meadows. So anyway, I was a man on the scene.
Yeah,
like I was making
man
my way
about
around.
time.
Yeah. I met Dino when I first started dating my wife. And he was coming in and out, back and forth from Austin to Los Angeles, right? He was always like some sort of what I call high-level wheeler or dealer, and I couldn't figure out if his family was associated with the mafia or like what the deal was, because for some reason this guy seemed to always have a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
and that's anathema to most musicians.
Right.
You just don't see local musicians just with a lot of disposable income like that.
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Right.
The reason that I'm mentioning that, not because there was anything nefarious about him. I mean, this guy didn't drink. This guy didn't smoke. You know what I mean? Like he was like a straight edge, good living guy. You
Right.
know what I mean? But his reputation was extremely controversial, right? Because he would put on these extravaganzas, right? With like live nudes on stage and like all sorts of just incredibly bizarre frivolity going on in this so-called white trash review,
Yeah.
right? And the music was all original material. And it was real hard funk rock, like the style of it, you know what I mean?
I see.
And he had this like extreme, persona where like when I was talking to you about the pompadour, like he had this whole other level of like pompadour going, you know what I'm saying? And set design and costume changes as if there was a label,
Yeah.
supporting like his production values and things of this nature. And long story short, he got into a thing to where he got into some sort of controversial conflict with some people at the Austin Chronicle. I can't even get into the weeds of like who did this or who fired the first shot,
Right.
but things got inflammatory.
Okay.
And they tried to blackball him. You know what I mean? If that's even possible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's interesting.
So he kind of came off the scene for a while. Went out to LA, tried to get some other things going. And then he came back and he had this whole new concept that he wanted to do called Dino Leaves Love Johnson.
Oh man.
LUV. Dino Lee's Love Johnson, right? And he just said, "Hey man, I really like the way you sing. Would you be interested in coming in and working with me on this project?" And I was like, why not? And it pays. I'm like, okay, that's all the better,
Yeah.
And man, I'm telling you, we used to play these shows at Liberty Lunch, and it would be like, people running around in like banana uniforms and I mean, half naked hula girls and like just all sorts of it was like a fever dream.
Yeah.
It was just what I needed, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because it was so off the chain,
Yeah. What a creative outlet.
Yeah, I mean, I was prone to getting out there in my underwear. You know what I'm saying? Because it was just that wild and loose. You know what I'm saying? It's like you just felt completely uninhibited while you were in the mix. The only thing that we stopped short. I often wish that we had been able to do like, you remember hearing about foam parties?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
We would have been like the perfect band for a foam party.
I see.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
Anyway, we made a record.
Okay.
It was called To Serve Man. It's like he borrowed that title from an old Twilight Zone episode where these aliens had come down and they were basically offering human beings like all of these beautiful health remedies and everything because they wanted to essentially like purify the meat because they were getting ready to export these people back to their planet so that they could eat them.
Okay.
And the title of that episode was To Serve Man.
Ah, I see.
We're here to serve. Right? When he put together the graphics for his his CD cover. It was basically a picture of Madonna with an Adolf Hitler mask and his head on a platter.
Man,
Yeah. So he was in that real edgy
shock rock.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like he was in that same arena like Butthole Surfers. Like, you know what I mean? Like
out of nowhere hit you in the face.
Yeah,
You don't know what to expect.
Like Guar without the monster suits. Wow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just to fast forward, you know, I had all of those forays, you know, and then the next thing that I did that was significant would have been this project called The Paradigm. And that would have been around 2005 with Chris Bailey. In my head at the time, it was going to be my Waterloo. You know, this is going to be like my do or die push uphill to see if I can get me and Chris a solid, you know, recording opportunity, right? So we went into the studio with this really good producer, really great guy named Mark Younger Smith. Mark Younger Smith was a touring guitarist with Billy Idol. You know, Billy Idol had this big hit single called "Rock the Cradle," "Rock the Cradle of Love." Mark is the guitarist on that, and he was the guitarist for that entire, you know, I guess world tour supporting whatever the name of that album was at that time. But he had made some significant production headway because he became really tight with Keith Forsey, who was like Billy Idol's producer. You know what I'm saying? So he had developed these production skills and insights, you know what I'm saying? And had built a home studio. And I loved those sessions just simply because they were so focused, you know, there wasn't any pressure per se.
Yeah.
You know, I still had the financial backing of my buddy Chuck Rodersman, so I wasn't just you know, running back and forth to the pawn shop to finance these sessions. And we had these really great new songs, you know, and so we went in and just recorded everything like really focused, and it was just essentially me and Chris with different rhythm sections as we saw fit for each track, you know. So I did this track called Slinky with Bruce Hughes on bass. Bruce Hughes from the Ugly Americans. I was almost a member of the Ugly Americans for a minute with Bob Snyder. It was just a situation where there was too many chiefs and no Indians.
I see.
You know? And so I begged out of that scenario. Little did I know, about 6 months later, they'd get a record deal, you know. But that's par for the course in my life, you know. I zigged when I should have zagged, or vice versa. It just wasn't meant to be, you know. But the fact of the matter was, we went in and recorded these tracks. The most difficult thing was being able to sustain like a live presentation of the tracks. It's one thing when you're, you know, 19, 20, 22, 23, guys will run on a lot of enthusiasm for a while, you know what I'm saying? But once you kind of cross this threshold to where people are trying to basically pay rent or pay mortgages or this, that, and the other
Take
thing,
care of families,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's like everything comes with an additional burden of a price tag, right? And so unless you do have what I call a baseline like anchor budget, like from a label or something like that, to where you can put people on some type of a modest salary or a retainer, so to speak, you know, it just became too difficult to keep people focused for more than 2 or 3 weeks at a time. You know what I'm saying? And the worst part about it was that by the time we had the material like ready to shop, it's like my manager at the time apparently had a nervous breakdown, you know, and his whole, you know, personal life was just disintegrating, you know, at exponential rate, you know what I'm saying? And so it's literally, like I said before, you know, for all intents and purposes, I gave everything my best personal effort, you know what I'm saying, to bring this thing to a higher resolution or a more, you know, public personification, you know, and I just ran out of gas. The upside of that situation was, you know, I managed to galvanize the integrity of my personal life, you know, was able to like keep my marriage intact and keep my spiritual life in central focus, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And suffice to say, you know, we haven't even talked about all the various side jobs and interim positions that I had to, you know, maintain just to kind of keep the lights on and keep things moving on a manageable trajectory, so to speak. But it's just that I know for a fact that I made so much positive impact artistically. You know what I'm saying? Like I never just gave up. You know what I mean? It was just a situation where I got to a point to where I kind of just aged out of the ambition that didn't appear to be tangible, right? It's like at a certain point, you just have to face reality and look at what your tangible scenario enables you to do. And it's not, I don't think it is healthy to just lie to yourself and just say, well, look, I'm just going to keep beating my head against this wall until I get through it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? At a certain point, the world keeps turning, and every time you look over your shoulder, there's a new thing popping up here and a new thing popping up over there. And just where you thought you had a fresh space to be unique for 15 minutes, you know what I'm saying? A month later, here comes something that's like fully formed, and maybe it has a vestige of like your idea or your concept or whatever. But you know what I'm saying? Like, man, this is a contact sport. This is not, you know, for the faint-hearted. This is not something that you do just because it's easy to do, you know? As a matter of fact, it's damn near impossible to do successfully.
Yeah. As we've learned over these 6 conversations, yes.
But I have literally, I can say this in good faith, is that I didn't leave any practical stone unturned.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I gave it my consistent, best, heartfelt, artistic effort, you know, every step of the way. And I traversed so much more ground than the average musician, you know, would ever see.
Right.
Because I didn't allow any sort of genre specificity to keep me pigeonholed, you know, in one little area. So I've had a full lifetime's worth of music, you know, and whatever I have evidence to show for it, I'm proud of it.
Thanks for listening. Know someone we should talk to? Give us a shout on Instagram at Austin Music People. Tell your friends, tell your family, and get out there and support Austin music.